dear participants. I'm Barbara Kerstians, at Interim Director in DG Research and Innovation, in the absence of Irene Norstedt. And I have the pleasure to welcome you to this Horizon Europe Cluster 2 Infoday on the 2022 calls. This thematic area of the program is the result of a close collaboration between our services and those of DG Education, Youth, Sport and Culture, and DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. And I give therefore also a very warm welcome to the other co-chairs, Stefan Hermans, Director for Policy Strategy and Evaluation in DG EAC, and Barbara Kaufmann, Director for Employment and Social Governance in DG Employment, who will also address you in a moment. The purpose of this Info Day is to present you the content of the calls opening in 2022 under the first biennial work program of Horizon Europe. We will do this through 3 information sessions where you will become familiar with the Cluster 2 research topics and have the opportunity to ask questions. Next slide, please. So Horizon Europe is structured in 3 pillars. The first one promotes excellent science. Most of the bottom part of the program is here with the European Research Council, Maria Sklodowska-Curie actions and research infrastructures. The second pillar, where our cluster is located, tackles global challenges and promotes industrial competitiveness. It counts 6 clusters, each addressing a particular challenge. And the third pillar fosters a dynamic European innovation system through the establishment of the European Innovation Council and of a European innovation ecosystems. And finally, a horizontal layer aims at widening participation in the program and spreading excellence among the participating countries. Next slide, please. So Horizon Europe's strategic plan directs research and innovation efforts towards impacts and challenges where the EU has clear added value in order to build the future we want. Departing from EU policy priorities, the strategic plan determines key strategic orientations where the EU can act in order to fulfill these priorities. As a compass to keep the direction of research action, the plan identifies expected impacts. By this we mean what the research and innovation project should achieve in order to meet the policy priorities. This is translated at the level of the work programs as destinations, topics, and expected outcomes of research. Next slide, please. So Cluster 2, Culture, Creativity and Inclusive Societies aims at the following: to enhance democratic governance and citizens' participation, to safeguard and promote cultural heritage, to respond to and shape multifaceted social, economic, technological and cultural transformations, also to mobilize multidisciplinary expertise of European social sciences and humanities, and to provide evidence-based policy options for a socially just and inclusive European recovery. The cluster will also address the unprecedented societal consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, and it will mobilize European social sciences and humanities research and innovation to provide evidence bases that enable policies to help recovery and enhance resilience and responsiveness in case of future crisis. Next slide, please. We do this through 3 destination or impact areas under which the calls of 22 have been published. So the first impact area is democracy and governance. The second one is cultural heritage and creative industries. And the third one concerns social and economic transformations. Next slides, please. So research funded under Cluster 2 will contribute to all the priorities of the EU's political agenda. And you see them on the screen in the formulation used by the European Commission when taking office. I'm not going to read them out, you can read them yourself. Next slide, please. Before handing over to the other co-chairs, let me say a few words on the destination on democracy and governance. It focuses on one of the main objectives of the current Commission, empowering citizens and building more resilient democracies across the EU. You can see on the screen some of the main policy documents that have informed the research topics in this destination. The European Democracy Action Plan, the Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy, importantly, a unit of equality, the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and initiatives to strengthen the rule of law in the EU. This destination mainly builds on the European Democracy Action Plan. It was adopted last year and is one of the major initiatives of this Commission in its new push for European democracy priority. It has charted out a series of actions to safeguard and enhance electoral participation, electoral integrity, media freedom, and to tackle disinformation. It also acknowledges the need to promote and nurture deliberative and participatory democracy beyond elections. Democracy, the rule of law, and fundamental rights are the foundations on which the European Union is based. Democracy is a core European value and a precondition for EU membership. However, they cannot be taken for granted. With social networks and new media, as well as the rise of political extremism and new forms of global governance, we are living through increasingly challenging times for democracy. So innovative research on democracy and governance will be instrumental in providing scientific knowledge, data, evidence-based recommendations and innovations to support the implementation of the European Democracy Action Plan and to develop innovative approaches to nurture and protect democracy and European values, and to ensure our citizens' liberty, equality, and active participation in shaping the future of Europe. Destination 1 will also build on the various targeted EU initiatives to make EU rights and values more tangible in areas such as equality and inclusion, gender equality strategy, LGBTIQ strategy, anti-racism and pluralism, so the anti-racism action plan, the EU Citizen Report, the rule of law review cycle, and the application of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. So while you will see now the next slide, please, I will hand over to my co-chair, Stefan Hermans of the Director General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. Stefan, over to you.
Thank you, Barbara. And also from my side, a very good morning to all of you and welcome to this Information Day. So I'm one of the co-chairs of Cluster 2, and I sit here as a co-chair representing the DG for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. And over quite a long time right now, we have been working very closely together with our colleagues of RTD, like Barbara and other colleagues, and also the other Barbara that you will hear very soon from DG Employment and her colleagues on designing this work program from scratch. It's a co-creation process which delivered, we believe, a balanced range of topics that were gradually enriched following the discussion that we had with the representatives of the member states, but also by drawing from the input of yourselves and of so many others who provided information and material for us during the various consultations. The 3 intervention areas in Cluster 2 form a solid package of topics that will support the implementation of the pillar of social rights, the Sustainable Development Goals, European Green Deal, or the new European Bauhaus, just to name a few top political pointers that lead our work at EU level. The topics included in the calls that were published must be seen as a coherent whole. So no matter in which of the 3 intervention areas of the work program they are placed, please look at them as part of a coherent whole. For instance, the new European Bauhaus topic spans the 3 intervention areas, linking not only to architecture and energy efficiency, but also to notions of community-shaped decisions, living together, sharing prosperity, ethics, creativity. There are many other examples, such as the topic about the future of democracy and civic participation, where applicants are invited to consider how the educational system can support inclusive citizenship, with a view to ensure participation in all aspects of democratic life. Or the Education for Democracy topic, where one of the outcomes we expect is building a robust evidence base that could guide educational authorities when designing curricula to support democracy. The topic about the impact of inequalities on democracy will also look into inequalities in access to education. Education and training are key long-term factors in preventing and reversing inequalities and promoting equal opportunities, inclusion, and social mobility. However, the educational outcomes of younger generations are still determined to a large extent by the socio-economic background of their parents, rather than by their own potential. Promoting and ensuring inclusion and equity in education and training is thus fundamental in breaking these patterns. The European Commission, for instance, is preparing a new initiative, Pathways to School Success, to support member states so that all pupils, including those from groups at risk of underachievement, can reach at least the basic level of competence and finish upper secondary school successfully, a condition so important for the rest of your life. Last but not least, the role of education and training in fostering critical media literacy is part of the topic Media for Democracy, Democratic Media. So once again, it is important to look into the three areas and not simply rely on a limited interpretation of a rather short title. Let me move on now a bit and also say a few words on policy priorities related to the European education area. And I think also here, this is quite important because what we're trying to do is, as you have heard by now, we're trying to link as extensively as possible policy priorities of the European Union with also activities that can be topics here within Cluster 2. So within the European education area, you can see 6 priorities in the slide. There's quality of education. High quality education is essential for young people to thrive in life. This means doing all in our power to make sure they achieve basic skills, promote competences like critical thinking, entrepreneurship, creativity, or civic engagements, but also driving excellence. Inclusion and gender equality. The Commission supports actions focused on inclusive education for all and for gender equality. And this is fully aligned with gender equality as a cross-cutting priority in Horizon Europe for all program parts to eliminate gender inequality and intersecting socio-economic inequalities, including those based on the non-discrimination and equality principles that Barbara outlined extensively for you before. Green and digital transitions is the third one. These domains have rapidly grown in importance and policies are developing fast. The Commission has launched the Education for Climate Coalition to encourage the education community to drive the green transition at their respective level through exchanges of experience and sharing expertise. Working is also underway on a proposal for a Council recommendation on education for environmental sustainability to help integrate the green transition and sustainability into schools, higher education, and professional training. It will provide guidance on how to cooperate to increase awareness, understanding, and most importantly, action. Work is well underway to address the digital divide and address some of the most pressing societal issues linked to the digital transformation, such as proposing of guidelines on fighting disinformation, as well as on artificial intelligence and data use for educators. Within the sphere of education, there is the Digital Education Action Plan. And a week ago, the Council adopted a recommendation on blended learning for high quality and inclusive primary and secondary education, to develop a shared vision and understanding at EU level of the approaches needed for a mix of learning environments and tools that are effective, inclusive, and engaging. And a proposal for a Council recommendation on the enabling factors for successful digital education will be developed in 2022. The same year, the Commission will propose a Council recommendation on improving the provision of digital skills in education and training. 4, teachers and training. Here, for the teachers and the trainers, they are so crucial in laying a basis for the future of each individual. Teacher training academies are supported via the Erasmus Plus program. I just want to single this as well. Higher education, on number 5. Commission is developing a European strategy for universities to deepen cooperation among higher education institutions. The Commission is also developing initiatives for building trust across our union for the wider use, portability, and recognition of qualifications, including through a European approach to micro-credentials, and preparing a proposal for deeper and sustainable transnational cooperation to support the member states in working towards overcoming obstacles that are hindering cross-border exchanges between higher education institutions. Together with the member states and stakeholders, the Commission will examine the potential scope and benefits of a European degree that could enable students to obtain a degree by combining studies in several EU countries and contribute to the international competitiveness of European universities. And finally, the geopolitical dimension. It's all about opening new avenues for interaction and cooperation with the education community on a global scale. Barbara has pointed out the progress made with Horizon Europe in terms of a sharper focus on impact and expected outcomes. And indeed, we need the right data, we need evidence, and we need to ask the right questions in order to support the translation of policymaking into effective results and actions that have impact. And I would also like to highlight that research targeted on education is greatly needed. To achieve the European education area, the EU has made more resources available for education than ever before. For the next 7 years, under the Erasmus Plus program, the European Social Fund, the European Regional Development Fund, the Digital Europe program, the Invest EU Fund, and in addition, the Recovery and Resilience Facility has created a clear incentive for specific and targeted funding for education and training in the EU member states to contribute to the recovery from the effects of the pandemic. Member states have shown interest to use EU funds for education and training. And as all member states are about to invest in education and skills, the impact could be and should be significant if funds are channeled in a smart way. Based on preliminary data, the most substantial allocations are currently foreseen for digital education and educational infrastructure. For the Director General I represent, research will help us implement our policy priorities in education and reach the targets set at EU level as part of the European education area. Next slide, please. As you can see, there are 5 EU-level targets in education to be achieved by 2030, and they are focused on several major challenges. Reducing the share of 15-year-olds who are low achieving in reading, math, and science to less than 50%, and to also copy this in terms of digital skills, but also participation in early childhood education and care, with at least 96% of children between 3 years old and the starting age for compulsory primary education who should participate in early childhood education and care by 2030. Early leavers from education and training. And also tertiary level attainment. Next slide. So cluster 2 includes destination 2, as you heard Barbara saying, on cultural heritage and the cultural and creative industries, embodying the wide spectrum of cultural and creative sectors' needs and their impact on society. Horizon Europe will help culture and cultural heritage fields to benefit from projects addressing the economic and social impact of technological applications and digital services related to the evolution of the sector. This will imply, for example, establishing a set of best practices in data collection, trends, and methods useful for understanding future scenarios. The key expected impact of Destination 2 is to exploit the full potential of cultural heritage, arts, and cultural and creative sectors as a driver of sustainable innovation and a sense of belonging through a continuous engagement with society, citizens, and economic sectors. Cultural and creative industries are fundamental engines of innovation, growth, and well-being. And it is crucial to further strengthen research and innovation investments and stakeholders' engagement on the green dimension, as well as on resilience and sustainability. This is particularly important for cultural heritage's preservation towards climate change effects and for its powerful and active contribution to climate action linked to heritage sites and buildings, providing great opportunities towards green objectives and sustainable practices. Topics of the calls indeed range from better protection, restoration, and promotion of cultural heritage to social cohesion, providing wider access to culture, heritage, and the arts, and analyzing the role of culture and cultural heritage in multicultural societies, contributing to sustainable growth and job creation. Key policy priorities such as the European Green Deal, including the new European Bauhaus initiative, are relevant to the program. A focus on recent consequences of the COVID-19 crisis has also been considered across topics and explicitly mentioned in some examples, such as on the music ecosystem topic. This in connection with the so-called preparatory action, Music Moves Europe, as well as the topic on the film making industry. All these topics are on the table for research, and they will feed into ongoing reflections on how to shape our next cultural agenda. So in a nutshell, and to conclude on my side, the policy priorities of DG EAC can benefit from research and evidence-based inputs. We hope to see many applications targeting these policy priorities because we urgently need them. We urgently need you to help us to shape the European education area, the new European Bauhaus, and our future cultural agenda. I thank you for your attention, and now it's my pleasure to pass the floor to Barbara Kaufmann. Barbara, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, and good morning to everybody. So my name is Barbara Kaufmann. I'm the Director for Employment and Social Governance, as well as Analysis in the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. And it's a great pleasure to participate together with my co-chairs in today's opening session. I have to say that we have really high expectations regarding the important contribution of Cluster 2, Culture, Creativity and Inclusive Society Research and Innovation Actions to European policy priorities. The results from projects funded by previous research framework programs were already feeding our policy making, and I'm really very confident that with Horizon Europe, we will reach new heights. Similarly to Barbara and Stefan, I also would like to mention briefly the policy context that you are expecting to contribute to in the social, employment and economic domains through your research, thanks to new insights, evidence-based results and policy recommendations. Stefan mentioned already the pillar of social rights that was proclaimed already in 2017. And it is our guiding compass, as you know, to a stronger social Europe, which is indeed needed badly at the current juncture when our economies are still recovering from the deep economic crisis and our societies face major transformations in the light of the green and digital transformation, as well as demographic change, of course. And the 20 principles that you see here on the slides are centered around 3 dimensions: equal opportunities and access to the labor market, fair working conditions, social protection and inclusion. Now, to make the pillar reality, the Commission put forward an action plan in early March of this year, laying out more than 60 concrete policy actions, and it also set out 3 ambitious headline targets for 2030, namely an employment rate of 78%, we're currently at 72%, to enable 60% of adults to be trained every year by 2030, and to lift at least 50 million Europeans out of poverty and social exclusion. And of this group, there should be at least 5 million children. I can say that we're currently in the process of discussing with member states their individual national targets that in the end, hopefully will add up to these targets and will guide also, you know, the vision in terms of policies that need to lead to the achievement of those targets by 2030. We also expect that the results of the research that you will be doing and will be financed through Cluster 2 can pave new avenues and provide solid analytical underpinnings to the actions carried out by, for instance, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the European Social Fund Plus, and the European Skills Agenda, just to mention a few. Now, more research can help us, of course, also in delivering fair, green, and digital transitions. Stefan Hermans already referred to that, and contribute to a better understanding of the social and employment impacts of these transitions, as well as to the design of adequate accompanying policies that will help ensure that the transitions are fair and inclusive. Promoting research and social innovation in support of fair, green, digital transitions is central to achieving our ambitious climate and energy targets. With a Fit for 55 package adopted in July, the Commission has presented the biggest ever legislative package in order to align our legislation in a number of areas with a higher ambition of reducing emissions by at least 55% by 2030. However, this transition will have significant socioeconomic impact. It will have also opportunities, but there are significant socioeconomic impacts, and the transition will not be fair by default. We therefore have to make sure that the right accompanying policies are in place so that the transition is fair, and that is also perceived fair. Now, besides having integrated social fairness elements in the design for the Fit for 55 package, I would like to say that we are also working right now on a proposal for Council recommendation that is supposed to come out next week on ensuring a fair transition towards climate neutrality, a Council recommendation addressed to member states, which will provide policy guidance to them. I think this is going to be a very broad recommendation, and it is worth looking into that. Now, research plays a fundamental role to better understand the socioeconomic implications of our transition policies, allow also for better monitoring of the actual impacts and a better anticipation of changing skills requirement or social investment that is needed in this crucial moment. Now, more generally, we need information for adequate policy makings, so also that we can conduct an open and transparent dialogue with stakeholders as part of the transition. And of course, it is important to also look at the impacts of the damages that the coronavirus has caused, not only, of course, on human lives and society, but also on the economic, employment and social front. So here also the research will be important. Now, speaking of forthcoming initiatives, and that brings me to the next slide, I just wanted to give you a very brief overview. I will not go into great detail what is going on so that you see a little bit the policy context. So and these are kind of actions that have been conceived and are put on the table in the context of the pillar of social rights. So as concerns employment, for instance, the Commission will adopt in the next days an initiative to improve working conditions of platform workers and an action plan for the social society. Moreover, next year there will be initiatives on social dialogue and on the protection of workers from the risks related to the exposure to asbestos at work. There will be also on skills. In the next days, there will be initiatives for individual learning accounts and micro-credentials to motivate and facilitate learning of adults in the especially focused on the individuals. Then also for 2022, there will be a new program called ALMA that was announced by our president in her State of the Union speech that should provide particular support to young people, neither in employment, education and training, and allows them to have first job opportunities abroad and then support their integration back home. And so lastly, in the area of social protection, the Commission will present in 2022 European Council recommendation on minimum income, and also will put forward a European care strategy. So I just hope that this has given you some glimpse of the many things that are going on, and to show you also what kind of initiatives your research can feed in the future, of course. Now, let me then go to more general points and to the budget in particular. Cluster 2 is allocated a gross amount of 2.28 billion euro. That's in current prices. Now, it's still true that our cluster remains the second smallest by budget, but still this amount is the highest ever in the European Framework Program in Research and Innovation. So this endowment and the increased endowment is a proof that there's an increased trust towards the community and acknowledgement of the spillovers in the social and economic sphere of the COVID crisis, and that adds to the already outstanding huge challenges that Europe is facing due to the macroeconomic drivers such as globalization, the demographic change, and then of course also an accelerated digitization, as well as the green, where we ourselves want to push forward, of course, very hard. Now, the next slide shows that the total budget for the cluster includes the administrative costs, the contribution of the missions, the main novelty of Horizon Europe, and here, the contribution to the missions, I should say, and the missions should help Europe reaching ambitious goals in fighting cancer, adapting to climate change, protecting our oceans, living in greener cities, and ensuring soil health and food. The estimated budget of Cluster 2 is, euro 1.2 billion, but this time we're not talking about current prices for the period 21 to 27, and 422 million for the work program of 21 and 2022. Now, in the next slide, here we see the chart shows the budget distribution for the first work program by area of intervention, by year, and by type of action. As you can see, we kept the balance established between the three destinations. The budget increase is already visible in 2022, and it is then expected that it will increase every year. So let's go to the next slide then and say that concerning the 2022 call deadline, as you all know, Cluster 2 calls will open on the 20th of January 22. And we are all looking forward to your applications, and the deadline for the applications will be the 40th of April 2022. Now, let me then finally come to the structure of the Infoday today. Here, Destination 1, dealing with the area of intervention on democracy and governance, will be presented shortly. I should say between 10 and 11:25, but we're slightly late. Then Destination 2, pertaining to cultural heritage and creative industries, will be presented between 11:35 and 1 o'clock. And then last but not least, Destination 3, dealing with the area of intervention on social and economic transformations, will be presented between 2:30 and 4. Finally, tomorrow, 8th of December, there will be the National Contact Points Brokerage event. The registration link is visible on the slide, and you will also find it in the Cluster 2 Infoday web page. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your presence today and wish you, also on behalf of my co-chairs, Barbara and Stefan, a very fruitful and informative Infoday. Goodbye.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can all hear me. I would like to welcome you to the session on the first destination in Cluster 2, the destination Innovative Research on Democracy and Governance. My name is Katja Reppel. I'm Head of Unit for Democracy and European Values in the Directorate General of Research and Innovation. Next slide, please. We have until 11:25 time for first giving you the presentations of the different topics which are in this destination, and that will be followed by a session for questions and answers. Could you please open already Slido and type in the code which is indicated, CL2 Infoday. You may already type in questions during the presentations, and we will then pick them up at the end of the presentations. Next slide, please. Before the presentations, just a brief overview of the different topics which are there. The call Reshaping Democracies has 9 topics. Its closing date is the 20th of April next year. The topics will be presented by colleagues of mine. The first 2, Future of Democracy and Civic Participation, and Politics and the Impact of Online Social Networks and New Media, will be presented by Nora Alavoine. The topic Impact of Equalities on Democracy will be presented by Andrea Erde. The topics Artificial Intelligence, Big Data and Democracy, and the topic Evolution of Political Extremism and its Influence on Social and Political Dialogue will be presented by Irene Keralt. And finally, the topics Education for Democracy, Media for Democracy, Democratic Media, Representative Democracy in the Flux, and Global Governance for a World in Transition will be presented by Francisco de la Torre. After these presentations, please, we'll take the questions. And with that, I would like to hand over to the first speaker.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. So I'm going to be telling you about the call, which will be launched in January, called Future of Democracy and Civic Participation. This is a €9 million research and innovation action. So why did we propose this call? Ask yourselves what state you find democracy and civic participation, and that can give you a fair idea of the, why we chose this call. So what we see are disengaged citizens and communities with eroding trust in democratic governance. We're also in a context of rapid digitalization of both society and government, so there's a need to engage with citizens in those digital spheres as well. We're also in a context of spontaneous forms of participation, such as youth movements and the racial justice movement. And we're in a situation where we see that these spontaneous movements have a lot of energy and participation within them, but there's a poor interface between them and governments. And so really it's a picture of representative democracy, which is under pressure with a need to revamp and reconnect with citizens. So we're launching this call, and the impact that we want to see after projects have done their work is increased civic participation, increased co-creation, notably with the least engaged categories of citizens in our societies. We want to see improved articulations between various forms of participation in deliberative processes, some of which may be spontaneous, and representative institutions. And this is in 2 directions. It also includes improved articulation and feedback mechanisms back from representative institutions to citizens. And overall, to respond to the context that we see, the impact that we want after these projects have done their work is to see improved trust in democratic governance fundamentally. So specifically, projects in this call, we want them to build on existing research. There's a wealth of projects under Horizon 2020, notably. There's projects to draw from on deliberative democracy, on digital public services. We want projects to review existing findings of research and innovation on civic participation for both spontaneous and organized forms of civic participation. We'd like projects to cover different scales of participation. So that when I mean scales, I mean like local, regional, national, European, perhaps even global forms of participation. And we'd like projects to compare the effectiveness of civic engagement in different topics or at different stages of the policymaking process. You know, civic participation can happen at many points in the policymaking process. We'd also like projects to provide foresight scenarios of how civic participation could be impacted by, shifts we see happening, notably increased digitalization. We'd like an examination of how the education system can support civic participation. And we really do want a specific focus on inequalities in participation. And there we'd like projects to propose remedies to inequalities in civic participation. And fundamentally, we want projects to propose ways to improve this articulation that I was talking about earlier, the mutual feedback between policymakers and citizens, because that's the loop where trust in governance, democratic governance is broken and needs to be fixed. Now, I'd like to speak about the second call that I'm the information point for. Yeah, exactly that one. The call on politics and the impact of online social networks. So also a research innovation action with a budget of 9 million euros. So for both of these calls, we're expecting to fund about 3 projects at the height of 3 million euros each. So once again, the question, why did we propose this call? So new media and online social networks, they open new avenues for political engagement and democratic participation, very much so. But we've also seen that they've opened paths for threats to political attitudes and civic participation. They've opened paths for disinformation, for polarization, for manipulation of political behaviors and covert influence. And this one is really a fast-moving field. There's new online tools and spaces being created all the time, which will inevitably impact on political engagement, such as, for example, the metaverse. So there's many reasons to propose a call such as this one. So the outcomes that we would like projects to come up with once they've done their work is to provide an understanding of the challenges and the opportunities presented by new media, the challenges and opportunities on our political behavior and on democratic engagement. We'd also like projects to produce evidence-based recommendations to address these challenges and opportunities. And we'd like to see enhanced capacities for digital citizenship. So specifically, projects responding to these calls, to this call, need to produce evidence of how new media affects political behavior. We want them to study perception biases that occur when new media are used by people for news selection, and also how new media might actually help democratize political systems through active participation, or how these new media might hinder participation for certain categories of people. So we'd like projects to study the effects of content consumption as opposed to media consumption, so the impact of this on people's political attitudes. We'd also like projects to investigate how different categories of people receive information on digital platforms and in different ways, and how political actors use these media, these platforms, to shape political behavior. And quite fundamentally, we'd like projects to propose and design regulatory innovations in response to the covert use of social platforms for political goals. And we'd like projects to propose methods to enhance digital citizenship, such as media education and digital literacy. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Andrea.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you who are with us this morning. I will introduce the topic, the impact of inequalities on democracy. So let me explain briefly our thinking behind the topic when it was defined. So we noted that citizens, especially in certain social groups, have been experiencing an erosion in living standards and a widening gaps with other groups over the past decades. The pandemic has further emphasized the impact of inequalities and reinforced a sentiment of distrust of its public institutions and political leaders. So the current economic downturn can lead to further disenchantment with politics and democratic participation, and even to possible general deterioration of the rule of law in certain countries. So when we speak about inequalities, we mean all types, the socioeconomic, gender or age-related, disability-based, spatial, as in rural versus urban areas, digital gaps, ethnic or linguistic inequality that can be identified in our societies today. We intend to investigate the impact of inequalities on democratic participation and governance. Inequalities were also noted, especially when persistent over time, have lifelong effects on the upgrowing generations and undermine the ability of the more vulnerable and excluded groups to participate meaningfully in the political process. For people experiencing multiple inequalities at the same time, when, for example, less economic opportunities coincide with lack of access to education or healthcare and social security, the situation could become even more detrimental. So what we needs to be investigated under this goal? We would like the projects to take stock of the long-term trends in and types of inequalities apparent in the EU countries, and identify their sources and the way they interact and overlap. We would like to see a modeling how the relationship between inequalities and the levels of political trust in European societies and the emergence of protest movements and populist discourse that we can also experience today. The ultimate question we would like to get an answer to is what set of policy measures can enhance equality and political engagement amongst the most vulnerable and excluded groups. So the research undertaken in the projects resulting from this goal should relate the diversity of policy measures from social policy, economic measures, through education, or even to housing and employment, to levels of democratic legitimacy and trust among the different groups. It should also examine the structure of political representation. For example, how much governments and parliaments represent the different social categories and groups, and the dominant political discourse compared to the levels of political engagement of the unequally treated groups. So what we expect to achieve with the funded projects. The funded projects will be expected to establish a comprehensive evidence base that helps us understand the long-term impacts of various inequalities on political participation, on the quality of democratic processes, and the stability of democracies in Europe. So based on the evidence collected and analyzed, we would like to see the projects develop, validate, and also pilot the strategies, the policies and actions designed to tackle inequalities while building trust and resilience at different levels of governance, including the local level, since experience shows that cities are consciously building vibrant communities through new policies and actions. They often co-create with inhabitants or specific groups where inequalities are most tangibly present. We would also like to see lessons learned formulated from the strategies and policies that support the inclusion of marginalized groups in democratic participation, public policy, and service design, as is the case more and more in the redesign of digital public services and in data-driven policy development, for instance. We strongly encourage actively involving citizens in this research and innovation action and using socially innovative approaches for the projects. The expected contribution per project will be between 2 and 3 million euros. And this is a type of research and innovation action, as I have explained, There's a research component, but also an innovation action in collaboration with policymakers in the field. And with that, I conclude on this particular topic and pass the word to Irena Keralt to explain the next one. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Andrea. So my name is Irena Keralt, and today I'm going to be introducing two topics. This first topic is called Artificial Intelligence, Big Data and Democracy. It's also research innovation action with a budget of 9 million euros. So again, the idea is to fund around 3 projects. And just to give you a bit the context and the rationale behind this topic, I think we're living, and we have seen that we're living in a society which is increasingly influenced and shaped by AI and by big data. We're producing bigger and bigger amounts of data about people's preferences, behaviors, political ideas, and so on. And this is used both by public, private actors in a wide variety of ways for multiple different uses. So as logically flowing from this situation, we are seeing both opportunities and threats coming out of the use of these new technologies. So the idea is that these projects can really evaluate and analyze the opportunities that come from using these kind of technologies for public interest in sectors such as health or education, or, I mean, given the nature of this destination, democratic governance and citizen engagement, but also consider the potential risks and challenges that might come from the use of these technologies, the unregulated use of them, their abuse of these technologies, as well as the risk that they pose to certain individual and collective rights and values, mainly because of the fact that they're questioning and bringing in from the first time questions that we haven't really been posed before. And in this context, of course, not just analyzing these challenges, but also really looking into how to confront them and how to protect citizens and protect the values from these challenges and these risks, both again in the private and the public spheres. And then going a bit further as well into looking at how to engage these kind of technologies and deploy these technologies in the field of democratic governance and civic engagement to further foster and strengthen democracy and participatory processes. So in terms of outcomes, I would say one of the first outcomes that we want to see is how to, again, protect fundamental rights and values from that might be challenged by the unregulated use, misuse, or abuse of these kind of technologies, specifically also considering dimensions of gender, as well as people confronting other kinds of discriminations or disabilities, and really as well considering how to use or to apply this kind of values-based frameworks to really, again, protect these fundamental rights and regulate the use of AI and big data. Secondly, I would say rather than just protecting fundamental rights from this misuse of these technologies, kind of flipping it around and thinking how to use these technologies to foster and reinforce fundamental rights. So really, again, looking at the effectiveness of monitoring protocols, of legislation, of non-regulatory measures, and so on. And then finally, and perhaps moving a bit from that normative approach that we have been talking about so far, going deeper into the experimentation side and looking into how to use these technologies in an innovative way to foster participatory processes, democracy, citizen engagement, again, through a more experimenting approach rather than just looking at the normative one. And then the next projects that I want to talk about today is also another research and innovation action with a 9 million euro budget. And it's the one on the evolution of political extremism and its influence on contemporary social and political dialogue. So again, the idea is to fund around 2 to 3 projects with this. And I think the background is quite self-explanatory with the topic. So coming from a context where in Europe we have seen the rise of extremism, extremist narratives and politics in the past few years. We could even argue that with COVID, this has even been strengthened and has also entered the public domain. So here with extremist narratives, I'm referring mainly to narratives that call for further protectionism, strengthening border control, portraying foreigners as threats, and in terms of ideologically also opposing certain rights and liberties and European values. Perhaps in more extreme situations and cases, calling for or enabling violence and criminal activities. So these kind of narratives, really analyzing them and seeing how they have entered the public domain, mainstream politics and mainstream policies. So these projects really not only, as I said, analyze these dynamics and do so in their local context with their specific cultural and historical and social circumstances, but also looking further into the global dimension and how they relate to other political phenomena like populism or the rise of conspiracy theories or rise of authoritarianism, or in general like anti-democratic sentiments, but also going a bit further into looking at what are the drivers behind this kind of narrative. So really what is pushing these narratives, in terms of psychological, behavioral, sociological, or anthropological drivers that we can see behind them. And perhaps even taking it a bit further and seeing not just what the narratives and the drivers are, but also what is happening. How is it that these narratives and these extremist politics are really getting into the more mainstream politics and using media and social media? So how is this interrelation between media, social media narrative and extremist narratives contributed to the penetration of these ideologies into mainstream politics and policies? And on the other side, something else that they should consider should really be how to tackle them. And in doing so, we can see more ethical or philosophical questions in terms of managing the tension between tackling these narratives and European values such as human rights or the freedom of speech, but also a bit more of a policy-oriented outcome in terms of evidence-based policies that can help to counter and to prevent this kind of extremist discourses. So again, as I said, in terms of expected outcomes, it's really important that these projects really have and really include, we want to see a balance in between the reflection and the thorough understanding of the factors contributing to these narratives, as well as their influence and the drivers behind it, but also the more evidence-based policy recommendations that can help to minimize them, to counter them, and of course to prevent them. So on this note, thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to give the floor to my colleague, Francisco de la Torre.
Yes, thank you very much, Irene. Hello, good morning to all participants. Francisco de la Torre speaking. I'm going to guide you through the last 4 topics of this presentation on the call on democracy and governance, reshaping democracies. Let me just recall you now that we are more or less midway, that the Slido is open for all of you to post your questions, be it using the QR code that you see on our backgrounds or using the hashtag CL2 Infoday. And maybe also a reminder now that we are midway, we are of course doing our best to highlight some of the main points, be it in terms of scope or in terms of expected outcomes of the topics, but of course the source to which you need to address yourselves and to go and find your way in is the actual text of the call, which is published and which was reminded by Katia at the introduction of this session. This being said, let me then go to the topic on education for democracy, which was very timely mentioned also by Stefan Hermans, one of the 3 co-chairs of this cluster at the introductory session, showing how the whole cluster works as a unique element entity and not as 3 separate strands of activities. Of course, we need to decline and to structure the call in different topics, but you can see the connections and the synergies between all of them. Education for democracy, there is, we know well, you know well, there is no secret spell that can be casted so that we manage to have the promises and ideals of this form of government democracy materialize. Democracies require, on one side, accountable, transparent, and trustworthy institutions. That's clear. There is the institutional dimension, but next to them, we have the lifeblood. We need responsible, critical citizens aware of their inner self and inner strength, if I can put it like that. And such a type of citizen cannot be improvised. It's not improvised. It has to be educated. And since the dawn of time, this is not new, those caring for the way human societies organize themselves have reflected on the role of education vis-à-vis the political existence of a given community. Contemporary EU societies are not an exception to this tradition. The proposed topic on education for democracy inserts itself on this continuous effort of reflection. What is the area of research and innovation that applicants would need to tackle? We expect proposals on one side and I will highlight, I insist, some only of the main angles of research and innovation on the topics. The full picture, you have it on the text of the call. But we expect proposals, for instance, to show how educational material and pedagogical practices in different settings can inform and facilitate current debates on a series of key issues pertaining to contemporary EU democracies, and the list is endless. You name some of them: sustainable development, migration, tolerance and understanding of ethnocultural and linguistic diversity, European identity, etc. We expect also that applicants will provide comprehensive evidence from European countries on the links, or will work in that direction. We'll aim at providing comprehensive evidence from European countries on the links between economic, social, cultural capital, and educational inequalities, and levels of political engagement, social trust, participation, and intercultural tolerance. Also, another angle, how education can be mobilized for producing informed historical and cultural consciousness by contributing to cultural and textual literacy, critical and analytical historical learning, responsible historical consciousness, and critical thinking of the future citizens of democratic societies. Research can also highlight the competences needed by students for boosting their capacity to actively engage in democratic politics, and the corresponding methods to guide teaching and the assessment of those competences should also be investigated, gathered, and analyzed. Which range of R&I endeavor we deem can be relevant for achieving the expected outcomes? Clearly mentioned in the text of the topic: experimental, participatory research to test educational and training tools and demonstrate their impact, including feedback from students and teachers. In particular, proposals can explode and should explode new education and training formats, blended included, that incorporate creative approaches, gamification, design of virtual classrooms and virtual co-working spaces, and other cultural expressions like literary interpretation, creative writing, or theater. And this in order to reach target groups in an effective and innovative way. And certainly involving citizens and young people, including through NGOs, social partners, and grassroots organizations, as well as cooperation with the cultural and creative sectors, are strongly encouraged. With this approach, the expected outcomes that the projects funded under this topic will aim at and should aim at is this building of a robust evidence base that could guide education authorities when designing curricula to support democracy. That was mentioned by Stefan Hermans a while ago, and this involving actively and engaging students in the process. Producing toolkits for enhancing humanistic and civic aspects of education, and for promoting active democratic citizenship, including experimental approaches, and strengthen democratic processes in education through citizens' involvement in defining educational contents, learning environments, and goals. We move to the next topic on media for democracy and democratic media. All of them, like the whole call, we are proposing research and innovation actions, and the envelope for each one of the topics, and then I don't need to mention it at the following ones, is in the order of 9 million, and the expected estimated budget for each project would be between 2 and 3 million euros. Media for democracy and democratic media. If I refer in the previous topic to the institutional dimension of democracy, to then complement it with individual, the citizens one, Here we are in a specific angle of this institutional dimension, which is media. Through control and criticism, and by offering a stage for the competition of ideas and interests and promoting political participation, inclusion, and responsible action of citizens, media are a powerful source of legitimation and external check on incumbent authorities, and therefore an essential part of a healthy and functioning democracy. As the text of the topic recalls, media accountability, which can be implemented through mechanisms like the press and media councils, ombudsperson, etc., and professional journalism, have a key role in democratic societies for safeguarding a free and responsible media. But in light of an increased economization of media communication, market concentration, and accelerated technological changes, with the automated content and selection of sharing processes, for instance, the established system of media accountability seems to be at a crossroads requiring innovative ideas for improvement. In that context, which is the area of research and innovation that applicants need to tackle in the proposals, examine, for instance, the political role of traditional and new digital media in performing key democratic functions and reaching out to all segments of society. They can also look at the conditions, including training, career, and working conditions, under which traditional and new media organizations and journalism operate in modern European societies. How do they serve public interest, and how this could be improved through better training, reinforcing ethical standards and competences, media regulation and rules, and cooperation between stakeholders. Changes, another angle, in media markets and the role of economic, commercial, technological, as well as political forces in shaping current changes in the role of media. And recent transformations in journalism and media technology affecting participation and democratic discourses, and a shifting political landscape, on the other side, with increased polarization, affecting also the media, this double flow, retro feedback in one direction and the other. Which type of research and innovation endeavor we deem can be relevant for achieving the expected outcomes that I will recall now? Certainly the active involvement in the research of the cultural and creative sectors. And also proposals should bring together in a holistic manner academic research, practitioners, reflection, and citizens' views on the relationship between media and democracy. The expected outcomes that the projects funded, actions funded under this topic should aim at and should be targeting, demonstrate how citizens and policymakers can contribute to a reinvigorated democracy through media, improve quality, accountability, and transparency of media production and distribution processes, contributing to a more resilient democratic institutional framework, and finally enhance citizens' participation in decision-making through enlightened access to pluralistic media content, toolkits, narratives, and methodologies. Next topic, representative democracy in flux. What is this flux the title refers to? Over the last decades, we have seen and witnessed significant changes in the electoral behavior of citizens. An overall declining turnout in participation terms, electoral participation terms, more volatility, together with an increased radicalization of voter attitudes and greater polarization, dealing at the end to a more fragmented political representation landscape. In a context of a more individualistic and at the same time connected societies, with an ever-accelerated development of technologies, digital technologies, new political forces, discourses, and voting preferences have emerged. While many of the identities and certainties of the past are eroding, new cleavages have marked the political landscape of representative democracies. In such a context, the area of research and innovation proposals should tackle some of them, could be an examination of the barriers and opportunities to reinvigorating and enhancing representative democratic systems, create a knowledge base on long-term developments in terms of trust in and trustworthiness of the political institutions of representative democracy and their legitimacy, relate the changing voting attitudes at the individual level to the wider political and cultural discourses, where feelings and emotions compete and even overrule facts and reasons, and to the emergence of new social movements and parties. Strategies to address the demands and needs of citizens expressed in other non-electoral forms of political participation with a view to active engagement and inclusion. Which range of R&I endeavor we deem can be relevant in this case? Comparative approaches, certainly at EU level, taking also into consideration the changing demographic composition of population, should be developed and taken into account in the research program. And proposals should also strive to include citizens and civil society at all stages of the research activities by means of consultation, structured dialogue, action research, social experimentation, and other active methodologies. All these to aim at the following outcomes of the projects funded under this topic: provide a comprehensive evidence on the mid to long-term impacts of current political and social developments on European representative democracies, and produce policy recommendations, toolkits, narratives, and methodologies for enhancing trust in political institutions and boosting transparency, representativeness, and inclusiveness of representative systems. And last topic of the call, Reshaping Democracies: global governance for a world in transition, norms, institutions, actors. At the very title of the topic, we make this reference to the transition in which our world finds itself. Major geopolitical and economic power shifts marking and identifying this transition. Emerging players creating new dynamics, relations between major powers increasingly becoming confrontational and unilateralist, competing visions and agendas on the global order are at play, which challenge established multilateral rules and organizations. Yet, at the same time, growing global challenges call for more, not less, multilateral governance and rules-based international cooperation. We have just gone through and are going through a pandemic, and the impact that this has had on global governance, for instance, is one of the examples, but we have climate change, you name them. The EU has, as an international political actor, a tradition and a political objective of defense of multilateralism through its enhancement and transformation as a crucial component of global governance. However, the EU's capacity and influence in shaping globalization are also shaken by these major geopolitical factors, such as the rise of new or re-emerging powers, China, India, Russia, to name some, and the reformulation of the transatlantic relationship. Which is the area of research and innovation that proposals would need to tackle in this case? We invite them to come up, for instance, with ways for redesigning, renewing, and reinvigorating global and European traditions of cooperation with a view to greater accountability, openness, and legitimacy. This would include, for instance, new reflections on the norms, institutions, and actors that can support a more robust and effective multilateralism, as well as a stock-taking and assessment of the modalities and possibilities of multi-level participation in cross-border governance, ranging from the local to the global level. Research should account also for differences between fields and areas of governance corresponding to diverse levels and modalities of multilateral cooperation. It should analyze whether and how such differences may hamper the governance of intersecting global challenges, health and mobility, for instance, in relation to the recent COVID-19 pandemic, sustainability and climate change, and propose ways forward. Proposals should also analyze, through a mix of normative and empirical methodologies, ways to reinforce institutions that work, ways to replace those that do not, and propose those that are missing, with the aim of spurring the transformation of global governance. And also, why not, identify new actors, norms, and processes of participation and representation, which can boost the legitimacy, transparency, representativeness, and effectiveness of multilateral institutions. Which range of research and innovation endeavor can be relevant in this case? Comparative approaches at the European and global levels should be developed, taking into consideration historical and cultural context. And certainly international cooperation with partners from third countries of interest is encouraged in order to better achieve the expected outcomes. And I name them to close my intervention: support the EU's role in leading the transformation and defense of multilateralism, and develop policy recommendations, institutional frames, toolboxes, narratives, and methodologies for supporting action towards transnational democracy. Thank you very much. Katia?
Thank you very much for your presentation, Francisco, and to all the colleagues. Just to remind you, there is more information on all this available, in particular on our funding and tenders portal. You can there also find the national contact points which are in charge of your country, and also get access to the research inquiry service. Let me just remind you that, of course, in this Infoday today, we are covering really very specifically the new call topics. We're not going back to the horizontal type of questions on which apply across the entire Horizon Europe. to remind you, there are recorded webinars available online, which you can watch. They've been recorded in the run-up to the first Infoday, which we held in June. And next slide, please. Let me also remind you before starting the question and answer sessions that when designing your projects, please draw on the results of the many FP7 and Horizon 2020 projects that relate to democracy and governance. There are around about 400 of them that we're aware of. So ensure that your proposals really take further the knowledge and understanding and the methodologies, approaches, toolkits, and so on that have been developed already in the past and still ongoing projects. So many of the projects to which you can find the links here on this slide, also summaries and reports, they are still actually ongoing. So it might be quite interesting for you to go through them and also to see which institutes are active in that. And with that, let me go to the next slide and open up the floor officially for the questions and answers. Still, for those of you who haven't connected yet to Slido, please do type in #CL2Infoday and ask your questions. And I would, with that, like to invite Cristela to share which question came in. I understand that there are already 15 questions which have arrived. Can we see the Slido screen shared?
Yes, I now sharing my screen with just 1 second. Maybe you should close yours for the moment. Why it's not working?
If it's not working, could I invite you to read out the questions that you see top?
Yes, it's working now. Okay. Yes. Yes.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much, Stella, and apologies for this. So first questions, how do we find and choose the pilots? What properties should they have, since there's more of this democracy transnational claim? I have to admit that I'm not quite sure to which of the topics this refers. Francisco, do you have any comments on pilots?
I was wondering the same as you, because the only reference to pilots I can see in the text of the topics are under the topic on inequalities and the impact of inequalities in democracy. But the reference to democracy transnational claim doesn't go very well with that. Maybe I don't know if the participant who posted the question could try to clarify posting another one if it was on the context of that topic of inequalities.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I don't see clearly neither.
Time while we're trying to clarify what was actually asked in this question. And now it vanished. Sorry about that. There was a question on the percentage, I think, of third countries to be involved, if I recall correctly. If you have it in front of your eyes, Cristela, can you please read out the question?
So the question was exactly how much percentage of the project may or should be used in the EU third countries?
My understanding, there is no definite definite threshold or percentage which needs to be achieved. I would guess that this relates to the topic on global governance for a world in transition. So it could be either for you, Francisco, or if you, Rosanna, would like to come in from the international participation side.
Certainly, if Rosanna wants to complement, fantastic, but I can indeed confirm that there is no, unless in the topic there is something written establishing certain repartition key, let's put it like that, unless it was the case, there is no definition of a certain average that should go to EU or other third countries. The proposals need to see in what makes sense in the context of the research program being submitted, which are the third countries that are relevant for the research program at the stake, and distribute the budget accordingly to the efforts and to the activities that are going to be done. No written rule on that, but Rosanna, certainly if you want to comment on this.
Yes, Francisco. There are no rules, there are nowhere, and in particular in those topics where it is not indicated a specific third country or specific third countries, which is the case of topics in this destination. So it's really up to the consortia to see to what extent the participation of third countries or one single third country contribute to the expected outcome and scope of the topic. What I would like to highlight, though, is the fact that the contribution depends on the state of the third country, because let's remember that the EU contributes also financially to low-income countries. On the contrary, if there are middle and high-income countries, these countries, the participants from these countries participate with their own funding. So let's remember also this, that they may join in both cases, but in one case they receive EU contribution, in another they come with their own funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosanna. I see now there was briefly on the screen a precision on the first ranked question regarding the pilots. And, there was a reference to the call Democracy 0109 that referred to global governance as well. Francisco, do you remember whether there was any reference to pilots in this?
I'm coming back. No, and I have the text in front of me. Sorry, a moment.
I see here on the screen, Horizon Democracy 0109. How do we find, and then the screen disappears, but I think it was about pilots.
Not in the text of the topic. Not in the text of the topic.
Well, then let's go to the next highest ranked. Cristela, can you please scroll up and take the top ranked questions? So the personnel expenses in the third countries we have covered. Next question is about how detailed should or can the projects be? I think there is only a technical limit in terms of the number of pages, but obviously the more precise your description is and the more specifically it relates to the scope and the expected outcomes, the better this is. Then comes another question, Francisco, always for you. What is meant by global governance in the context of this call?
Of the topic 9, that's a clear one. I mean, I don't know if we should provide a scientific or academic definition of it, but what we have in mind is certainly the network, or the complex network, because it's a complex one of there are formal and there are also informal institutions, mechanisms, relationships, rules, organizations established among states, citizens, organizations. There are actors that are not, how to say, political ones, but transnational organizations and even transnational corporations that play also a role in the international global landscape. I would leave it at that. It refers to rules, it refers to norms, it refers to institutions and less institutionalized fora, different levels of governance, local, regional, national, and international, as wide as it can be.
Thank you very much. I take the next question. It comes from the Karlshochschule. Suggestions on how to find good consortia. Is there only the funding tender EC site, or are there other good partner finding sites as well? Besides the site and the partner finding tool that you're referring to, I would like to reiterate what has been said already in the beginning by Barbara, that there is a brokerage event which takes place tomorrow, and you can also find that on the website of the Commission. So at that brokerage event, you'll have plenty of opportunities to interact. Another possibility to identify partners with whom you would like to form a consortium is also to look into some of the ongoing projects, hence the slides which I projected after the presentations, where you can see some where you could see links to specific projects, but also to the entire Cordis web database. And on that, you can see which institutes actually are involved in projects currently ongoing that fall into a range that might be interesting for you. The next question is on education for democracy. So I'm afraid, Francisco, this is again for you. How do you see the ratio between researching and implementing innovative education programs for fostering democracy? Researching and implementing innovative education programs.
In the context of the topic, of course, and the projects, it will depend very much. It is clear if the participant posting the question has read the text of the topic, and it seems so, that there is a strong accent in it on this innovative approach and practical implementation on the design of new curricula, proposals, etc., and the reference to innovative pedagogic approaches, etc. How to reach the good balance there? I cannot put it on a 60-40, 70-30, or 75-25. No way, I cannot do that. The focus is there. The call or the invitation to go on the implementation and experimental approach is there, but of course it has to be underpinned, the proposal, also by the relevant theoretical and methodological structure. No, I certainly cannot put which is the proportion, but proposal should have a good balance and certainly come up with this innovative and practical and experimental approaches. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think I understand this question on implementation. It's not really implementation. If you want to implement innovative educational projects, there are definitely national or regional funds available, or also, of course, from our colleagues in the Directorate General for Education and Culture. So I see the numbering and the order of the questions jumps. Will our PowerPoints be available? I believe yes. On the website of the Infoday, by the way. And then comes an excellent question: how to assess the impact on democracy, as effects have long time to work and cannot be achieved within the project periods. Excellent question. That's why we are also talking about the outcomes of projects. If you read the details of the text, we're referring to outcomes that really are within the control of the project, of the consortium working on the project. We would, of course, in the medium to long term, have real impacts on democracy, on good governance, and so on. But this impact is, of course, nothing, impact or lack of impact is, of course, nothing which could be imputed on a project per se. This is really aggregated for the entire Horizon Europe and the different clusters and destinations. So it does not have any impact on funding and conditions for the individual projects. I take the next question on democracies 0101, AI, big data and democracy. Could you say a bit about what is meant by value-based frameworks in this context? And I wonder whether it is Irene or Francisco who wants to take the answer on this question on AI and big data and the value-based frameworks.
Yes, I'm happy to give it a try. Thanks for the question. I think I would refer here to the text again, and actually we talk there about really ensuring that the philosophical, legal, and ethical values are embedded in the development of these frameworks, and they're really like together with they're really in line with the values that are outlined in the white paper on artificial intelligence developed by the Commission. I think you can also find a reference to it in the actual tender and the main work program. So I would really refer you to go back to that paper and really read a bit more into it to see specifically what kind of values we're talking about. But yeah, to sum up, frameworks that are really based in the respect and ensuring those philosophical, legal, and ethical values.
Thank you very much, Irene, for clarifying that. Then I have a question which I think will go to Andrea because it refers to the topic on inequalities. It says, children and youth, would it be okay to focus on young people, the age group 16 to 29? Andrea.
A clear answer, yes. Children and youth are not an exclusive focus for the call, but as future voters, we also have an interest to find out how the findings will match what you find with the youth, and especially in this age group is already very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Next question is, what is the recommended project duration? I think for our research and innovation actions, we're talking here about something between 2, 3, maybe 4 years. Francisco, do you want to add anything?
Not really. It's a standard duration, indeed. Let's put it like that, around 3 years and a bit over that. It may depend, of course, also on the actual content of the proposal and what the consortium is putting on the table and which is the structure of the consortium also. But indeed, historically, let's say, or that historically data-wise, that's a reasonable estimation approach. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And the next question, I think, goes again to Rosanna. Can British universities and/or British NGOs be involved in a consortium on education for democracy? Rosanna.
Thank you, Katia. Yes, universities and organizations from United Kingdom can be involved. The negotiation association is ongoing with United Kingdom. And of course, the idea is that the association should be finalized by the time the grant agreement are signed. And if this is not the case, of course, there will be, let's say, suggestion and situations that will apply on a case by case. But yes, of course, they can apply because the negotiation process is ongoing with United Kingdom for association to Horizon Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. Next question, will there be more brokerage events foreseen in the next weeks? I think there are Infodays and brokerage events foreseen for different parts of Horizon Europe. For Cluster 2, there's only the brokerage event which is foreseen for tomorrow, I'm afraid. If you're interested in brokerage events for other clusters or parts of Horizon Europe, please consult the webpage. This is all advertised in them. Then the next question is, are we to provide the results of research already as part of application, or are we expected to design research methods and stages as part of the application? I think when you formulate the proposal text, obviously you should make clear that you dispose of research results already and describe how you are building on these results. Design research methods and stages as part of the application. The application should definitively describe what methods you are using and what are the different steps. Francisco, do you want to add any more detail?
No, not really. I mean, of course, in the research proposal, you are also coming up with what you are planning to do, which type of research activities, underpinned by which methodologies you are going to go through over the 3 or 4 years of the research plan you are designing. But of course, you are not coming. It's not the first time, but probably for many of you, and you have some research history behind you, and the consortium will have a research history behind itself, and there may be indeed already some valuable results that you can refer to in the proposal. It also will prove the capacity and the track record of the consortium, no? But you are also proposing something you are aiming to achieve throughout those 4 years.
Yes, thank you very much. And I take the next question in democracy. Now it jumped. It jumped again. So here we are, concerning democracy 0102 topic. The 02 topic is referring to the future of democracy and civic participation. So this is going to Nora. Could a proposal centered on mediation and its role in civic participation democracy be relevant? What do you think? Mediation.
Yeah, so I think mediation could certainly be a wonderful thing to examine because in the call topic, one of the things we really want to examine is this articulation between the traditional representative institutions of government and different forms of civic participation, including spontaneous forms of citizen engagement. So I think mediation is certainly a really interesting thing to examine in the light of that articulation, but it's probably not sufficient. If you read the call text, there's plenty of other things that projects should do. So yes, mediation would be interesting, but not sufficient on its own. So make sure that you cover the other necessary aspects of the call. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. With that, I come to a question. Partners, the Erasmus Directory of Funded Projects. is very well done and helpful to find partners for new consortia. Could we have the same format for Horizon? Now that overreaches my knowledge of the Erasmus directory. I am aware of the Cordis database for Horizon, which is very good, and you can search there by various parameters, also by the names of the institutes which are involved. But I think this is rather a question which I will hand over to the general coordinators of Horizon Europe to see whether we can copy that. Is there any one of you, Paco, Francisco, please?
If I may, Katia, just also for the participant who posted that question, to be aware, he or she could be willing to repost it, sorry for that, at the session that there will be this afternoon after the third destination, which is ending around 4, as from 4:05, more or less, knowing that there can be some décalage always in the timing. You will have half an hour on a practical session on hints and next steps about this call on reshaping democracies and the other 2 calls of the 2 destinations. So there, and I know probably, and I don't know if they will cover the participant portal, but there are knowledgeable colleagues. The session will be handled by the Research Executive Agency colleagues, and there are knowledgeable colleagues about the functions of the funding and tenders portal. In any case, the search partner function in the portal, I believe, works quite well and is also established based on the existing participation, so existing projects, funded projects of Horizon 2020. So the history track of the participants is always there when searching for a partner. But there is always room for improvement, and I'm sure they will be happy to hear from you any suggestion on that line.
Thank you very much. I see the numbering is jumping, and I'm happy to see that you're upvoting what the other colleagues are asking about. I take the next one on the extremism call, and I think that goes to Irene. Is the project about extremism, can it also tackle the foreign extremist propaganda campaigns? I would say yes. What do you say, Irene?
I mean, yes. So I don't know specifically about the propaganda campaigns themselves. I would focus more on the narratives that come from there. But of course, yes, as I said, it's important that these projects analyze both the local dimension with their social and historical characteristics, but also the global dimension. So really looking at how these narratives are connected and also concerned with other narratives around Europe and globally, but really taking into consideration that these narratives are circulating within one or various states in Europe.
Thank you very much, Irene. And we should talk all a little bit more slowly, I understand. So thank you for the comment, and apologies if we were running through that a little bit too fast. I take the next question. Are small and medium-sized enterprises funded 100% in the research and innovation actions? The work program for Cluster 2 in Horizon Europe doesn't indicate the percentage of funding as in Horizon 2020. My understanding that for the so-called RIAs, the research and innovation actions, is that we are actually funding 100% of the actions, unlike the innovation actions. Francisco, I see you nodding and confirming, so the answer is yes. And then I can take the next question, which jumped again. So 0109, this is again a question, I think, which goes to you on global governance, Francisco. Expected outcomes. Focus on EU policymakers. Does this also mean less action is expected to other target groups, academics, general public, NGOs? Expected outcomes.
I was reading one of the expected outcomes is indeed support the EU role in leading the transformation and defense of multilateralism. The topic is being funded by the EU, so it's just natural, I would say, that we suggest that one of the midterm impacts of or outcomes of the project would be this one. That doesn't mean at all, because the way it's formulated, I don't know if the participant wanted was meaning, does it also mean this action is expected for or less outcome for other target groups? In any case, what is certainly expected is that academics or NGOs or any other global or actor relevant in the global governance scene, if possible and deemed relevant by the consortium, wants to be involved in the research activities, that would be excellent. How to say, the more participatory you can participation in the sense of including different voices. You can make your research program, research plan, the better. But indeed, at least that outcome is focusing on the role of the EU in the defense and promotion and transformation of global multilateralism. Then, when developing policy recommendations, institutional frames, toolboxes, etc., I think they are the recipients and the users of those could be more varied.
Yes, thank you very much. You may by all means have more outcomes of the projects than the ones which you have to deliver according to the topic descriptions. So you can expand that. So I take the next question. Is it obligatory to submit any attachments to the application? Now, that is visible in the application form, which is now an electronic tool. And I think these details could also be asked on like which attachments and so on at the session that Francisco referred to a little bit later in this afternoon, when our colleagues from the Research Executive Agency will be there. I take the next question. Is there a place for scientific communication in any of these calls? Considering the role of open access, multilingualism, etc., for an equal access to knowledge. Now the question was jumping a little bit down again. Yes, please, scientific communication on what are you doing in the projects. Of course, please do it. There is, as a general principle, the wish and the objective under Horizon Europe to really reach out and be much stronger on the dissemination of the research results. And the issue of open access is also something which is addressed and has to be addressed in all projects. I take the next question, which I think now is for 001, the topic on artificial intelligence, big data, and democracy. Is there a specific definition intended with the term values-based frameworks that I think we had already? And Irene answered it. What's the balance between research and innovation in there? Would you like to add anything on that?
No, I mean, just again, as I said before, you can refer to the actual text and you can look at the white paper on artificial intelligence, a European approach to excellence and trust. And in there, I think there's a deeper and more thorough explanation of what we mean by value-based frameworks. And in terms of the balance between research and innovation, I would say the projects are only required to contribute to 2 of the expected outcomes. However, we would really want to see a good balance between the more normative side, as I mentioned, and the innovative and experimentative side of the topic.
Thank you very much. And I also saw one question which was voted up and voted down and then sometimes disappeared, on the definition of actually what are European values and where they're defined. There's actually a footnote, they're defined in the European treaties. And if you want to go further, look in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. And since we are coming close to the end of the session, which has to be in 3 minutes, I will take only the 1 or maybe 2 other questions. Should we shape the proposal to delimit themes covered by other call topics, as there are many overlaps in the different topics? Well, yes, the different topics are relating to each other, and some of the aspects can be addressed in different topics. When you choose to a specific topic and reply to it, please try to stick as much as possible to the defined scope. Really read very carefully. There are minimum requirements for what has to be addressed in the scope. And please also try to make sure to cover as much of the expected outcomes as you can and as it fits into the concept of your proposal. And because they're evaluated always in the context of exactly the topic under which you are submitting the proposal. If there are things which reach beyond, which may also have outcomes relating to other topics, you're welcome, but please focus on being as complete as possible when it comes to the topic to which you are responding. I take, now the questions are jumping up and down. We've done the delimitation questions. Are NGOs funded 100% yes, because it's a research and innovation action. And I take, there is one question on the status of Switzerland, which I take very quickly, profiting from Rosanna's presence.
Thank you. Thank you again, Katja. Yes, Switzerland is a non-associated third country. And of course, as it is a high-income country, normally Swiss participants should join consortia with their own funding. So 0 EU contribution, but of course with their own funding. Bearing in mind that there may be exceptions, for example, if the participation of a certain Swiss participant is considered essential for the consortium, only in that case, or unless specified in the work program, Swiss participants may receive EU contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosanna. And there is another question which is actually linking to our global governance topic, where there's noted funding is limited for some third countries in this global governance topic, but the emphasis on international cooperation is not there. Is this more for research? Is this more for dissemination? Maybe Francisco, you also have comments on that.
I refer to what Rosanna just mentioned. I mean, for certain type of third countries, they need to come with their own funding. In other cases, there is a possibility to accept the funding of the activities that they bring to the proposal. What are we aiming at? I mean, the proposal has a research angle for sure. The proposal should have a research angle, but they should also have, as you have seen in the proposals template, a specific time and resources allocated for dissemination and communication activities. The balance between all those legs of the table will depend on what you are aiming at. But the question of funding may limited for some third countries, I don't see the connection to what the proposal should be aiming at. You should be covering what the text of the topic has defined, has brought forward.
Thank you very much. I'm wrapping up with the questions just very, very quickly. The first one now ranked here, political actors using social networks, include also foreign actors. I would over the thumb say yes, because in social media, it's extremely difficult to see where physically actually the actors are seated. And I see Nora nodding. Hope that's...
Yeah, I mean, especially when we're talking about covert influence, yes, that does include foreign actors. But in the bits of the call where we're asking for, you know, enhancing and improving civic participation, there would more focus on countries concerned by the call. But yes, foreign actors certainly in the analysis of covert influence to affect political behavior.
A little bit over time. Non-regulatory measures that can be codes of good practice, self-obligation things and so on, which are quite common in the world of digital actors. I unfortunately really have to draw to an end our session now. Thank you very much for having joined. Let me remind you that you can ask any questions which you come up later on via the research inquiry service. There is also a link on the PowerPoints that we showed today. Or of course, please address yourself to the national contact point in charge of your country. With that, I would like to thank you, and please stay tuned, because the next session on the next destination in cluster 2 will start in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much to all the presenters. Thank you, Christella, for having managed the Slido part, and have a good day. Goodbye.